Coming up on the Together for Good podcast, I want to talk about how to raise kids in the faith. I'm not an expert. I do have some experience, I have some ideas and some things that seem to be working well with my wife and I as we raise our three kids. I'm excited to share this with you and also hear from you about some of your ideas and ways that you've seen to raise kids in the faith that have been helpful and good for their well-being. Let's see what happens. Here we go. Welcome to the Together for Good podcast, a podcast created by Bethany Lutheran Church in Cherry Hills Village, Colorado, and hosted by me, Pastor Nate Preisinger. On Together for Good, our goal is to provide practical, engaging content that supports you without expectations. Whether you're feeling disconnected from traditional religion or simply exploring what faith means in your life, we're here to walk alongside you. No matter where you are on your journey of faith, we're glad you're here. Welcome to Together for Good. All right, raising kids in the faith. It's a question that I think lives at the heart for a lot of parents out there, is that they want to find a way to pass their faith on to their children. And oftentimes it's about morality. I hear that a lot. It's like, well, yeah, we're going to come to church so my kids can learn some good morals. I have a lot of theological thoughts about that approach to it. Hopefully they learn good morals anyways. And yeah, like our faith is about helping people understand the spark of God, the belovedness of God that lives within each and every human being. And so what I always say is that any dehumanizing behavior is not pleasing to God. And that part of our call, part of what the gospel compels us to, is to be people who love the humanity of every person that crosses their path, or at least attempts to love the humanity. That's really hard work. So that right there would hopefully, yes, create some moral behavior. But yeah, I don't like the idea of us seeing church and faith as just a list of rules or some sort of program that we have to follow. And so we want to get our kids to go to church so that they can learn all the rules and then do all the rules and then earn their rule gold star and just be a good person. I think what we're trying to give kids is something much deeper than that. It's a view and an understanding of reality that hopefully opens up their heart to not only appreciate and love the humanity of those who cross their path, but additionally to appreciate the sacredness of creation, the beauty of this world, and that they can find a sense of worth and well-being that isn't temporary or fleeting. Because think about it, if all they ever learn are morals, but they never learn that their worth is in something bigger than themselves, well, there's still all sorts of ways that their mental health could get into a difficult space. If you have good morals, but you think that your self-worth is dependent on your net worth, you're setting yourself up for a life of anxiety and worry and constantly struggling to climb the corporate ladder and earn and gain more. And you'll never actually experience the abundant life that Jesus promises us because you'll be so focused on defining yourself by your position or your prestige or your wealth. And so that's why I think that raising a child in the faith has to be about something much deeper than just simple morality, because we need to learn that there's more to us, that there's more to existence than just the present moment. And think about as well how much humility that creates in people. I know that in AA, that one of the 12 steps that they really encourage is belief in a higher power. And so for people who are struggling with addiction, one of the paths towards healing, one of the steps is to just remember that there's something bigger than yourself. That I think that's sort of the essence of that idea. And I find that so helpful for all of us. I think that's what religion and a life of faith is hopefully trying to encourage, is to realize my struggle in this current moment is a lot, and God's bigger than that. For me, I don't know what it is or why that has always been so core to my spirituality. Just that God is beyond my comprehension, that God is so much more than I can articulate or imagine. And so that, I think, instills within me a real deep sense of humility. And when I look at the mountains here in Denver, Colorado, driving home with beautiful mountain views all the time, particularly here at Bethany. Okay, in case you didn't know, in the sanctuary at Bethany, you can look to the right, and as long as it's not cloudy, you just get this beautiful mountain view. They built the sanctuary to highlight God's beauty, and I love that about this space because there's something so humbling. I look at these mountains, I'm like, oh my gosh, like there is something so much bigger going on than Nate. And then whatever is frustrating or making Nate's life difficult today. And that fills me with a lot of peace. It is just the grandness of God. And so, yeah, faith and teaching faith to our kids, at least the way that my wife and I are approaching it, part of it is to encourage that sense of awe, that sense of wonder, and that sense of curiosity that comes with believing in something bigger than oneself. Additionally, I think one of the things my wife and I are trying to protect against is a type of faith that pretends to have all the answers. I think that's when certain practices or expressions of faith can get really destructive, is when we say, like, no, this is the only way to think about that big question. This is the only way. When we become that black and white and narrow in our thinking, that's when people get harmed. That's when people get hurt. That's when hatred can develop. They're doing it wrong. They are on the outside. And so part of what we're trying to do with our kids is, yes, create this sense of awe and wonder and humility and this understanding that God is always so much bigger than how anyone can put it. And so my kids know that means that they get to critique my sermons or say very openly and honestly, like, hey, like that didn't make any sense. I didn't like that. That wasn't good. Yeah, it's very humbling. And that's a good thing. I always, preachers need to be kept humble, maybe most of all, since we're the ones speaking about the divine in a public setting on a regular basis. Holy cow, what a responsibility. So yeah, thanks, Evelyn in particular, my oldest. She's pretty good at keeping me humble and arguing with me. But back to it, raising kids in the faith. This sense of wonder and curiosity really is at the heart of how my wife and I try to approach it. And one of the ways we do this is that when our kids come to us with a question or even an idea, we don't give them an answer. We agreed on this early in our marriage, and frankly, it comes out of the Godly Play curriculum, which is a really beautiful storytelling curriculum that's often used like as a Sunday school type of setting or class. But it really encourages the inherent spirituality of children. And it is designed in such a way that you try to foster that for the children in the class. And so the way Godly Play works is you tell a story, and then at the end of the storyteller just says, like, I wonder what your favorite part of the story was. I wonder if this story would have been different if we changed a part of it. You get the idea. And then the classroom is just invited to respond and to offer their own wonderings as well. And the whole idea is that it's encouraging the inherent spirituality of a child. There's nothing scientific about what I'm about to say, but the way I like to think about it, and the way I've heard it expressed before, is that children come into this world and they come from the divine in some way. They come from eternity and they enter into this temporal existence. And so people will say, like, yeah, children are closer to God because they haven't been in this world that long. This is not in the Bible. This is not scientific. It just sounds really nice. And so maybe I shouldn't be saying it. I'm not saying this with authority, but just offering it as like, what a beautiful way to think about it. And that, yeah, these children haven't been corrupted, and maybe corrupted's not even the right word, but like boxed in to a specific way of thinking and talking about their understanding of life, humanity, and God. And so to encourage their inherent spirituality and their curiosity allows children to then tell you some of the most mind-blowing things and pictures. And so my youngest daughter will say, like, Dad, what do you think heaven's like? And right, like, I don't have a clear answer. The Bible is not specific on what heaven is like, but I don't even say any of that. I just like, I don't know, Miriam, what do you think? And then she is able to offer and feel affirmed and encouraged and able to practice speaking about her faith, which is really part of what we want to do for our kids, is to help them make faith something personal for them, something that's their own. I don't need her to just parrot back to me some sort of stock answer, right? If she comes to me, Dada, what's heaven like? Like, let me tell you specifically. Wah, 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 wah. One, she won't probably listen to it. It'll be like the Peanuts parents talking. Two, she probably won't retain it because I'll use big theological words that I shouldn't be using for a child, not appropriate for the situation. But she'll have no chance. All she's doing there is receiving and listening and never having the opportunity to speak for herself and to really think about these things on a personal level. And I think it's just so much more powerful for our kids if we give them the chance to articulate their own faith as best they can. Within that too, we have to resist the urge to always correct. And so if they say something that sounds like heresy, which is probably not going to happen, but you don't want to embarrass them. You don't want to shame them. Be like, no, that's wrong. How could you say something like that? If I can't think of that ever coming up, but I think if it did, what I would say is like, oh, like, well, have you thought about it this way? I guess that's what I do a lot more often with my oldest daughter, where our conversations are becoming more evolved and advanced and intricate. And so it's like, hey, I hear what you're saying. What about this? And again, trying to encourage and affirm, never shame or correct even, but just inviting the conversation. And that's part of all of this too, that I think is so important, is that you want your kids to be able to talk about their faith with you. It has to be so much more than just like, hey, like just do these rules, do these tasks, and don't let it mean anything for you. No, like I hope, and I love those moments when my daughter is like, hey, I don't like this, and we get to have a real discussion, because it strengthens our bond and our trust as we're both a little vulnerable in that type of conversation. And if you've ever been in a deeply religious discussion that's held in a safe way, I should say. Think about, maybe in your college dorm room, just talking about life and the universe with your new friends at college. There's something so powerful and connective about those types of discussions. And to be able to have that with your kids just builds such a strong bond and relationship as they learn to trust you and you learn to trust them. And as you get to see them as so much wiser than you ever expected, something really beautiful about the relationships that can be strengthened through approaching conversations of faith in this way. So a couple other pieces sort of related to this whole discussion on raising kids in the faith. And again, I said this in the beginning, right? Like, I'm not an expert, but these are just things that my wife and I have found to be really valuable and affirming. One of the other pieces is just traditions and rituals. This has always been the case for humanity since the beginning of time, is having specific ways that you live out the ideas and ideals of your community. And your family is its own little community. And so you can have your own traditions and rituals, and those can come to be so formative. One of our traditions, I have a very, very busy Christmas Eve. Bethany usually has 5 Christmas Eve worship services. Depending on the year, they start at different times. Usually it starts about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So basically, the whole afternoon of Christmas Eve, I'm out. And I get home at 10 o'clock at night, and the kids are already asleep most of the time, as long as they're not too excited for the next day. But so knowing this, as soon as I moved to Colorado and started here at Bethany, I wanted to make sure that my kids and I had something special on Christmas Eve for us. And I wanted to make sure my wife had a little bit of a break, because it's a long day for her to be a single parent while dad's off at church. So what we do is I get up early with the kids on Christmas Eve. and I make them, everyone gets their own little thermos of hot chocolate, and we go on a Christmas Eve hike. And we just go, there's a beautiful green space right near my house. Shout out Cherry Knolls, really awesome Dry Creek Trail. And we just walk through there on Christmas Eve together. And then usually at the end, I have some sort of like book that I'll read to them. And I just try to very quickly and carefully articulate the importance of this holiday from a faith perspective too. And just being like, hey, like this is about God coming to be close to us and just knowing that God is with us. That's what Christmas is about. God coming down from heaven to be so close to us, to exist in the same way. Hopefully more, right? Like, and I'm sure the 6-year-old's like, great, Dad. But I'm trying. and they're going to remember this, because what they do remember and what they love is that special time we have together. And so, yeah, maybe the faith teaching I'm trying to do around it, I don't expect them to remember any of it. But over time, they're going to remember this ritual and start to also pick up some of the pieces of the ritual. The other part that we do on the hike is that we'll just be walking along and I'll tell them, all right, stop. And then wherever we stop, it's like, okay, what do you see? What do you hear? What do you smell? What do you feel? And what do you taste? 5 senses. And this is a great practice that you can use anytime. It's really also a good way to ground yourself if you ever have a child who's out of control. All right, stop. Whoa. Let's just be present in the moment and pay attention to our senses. But that's a lot of what I try to instill in this ritual. It's like, hey, we're just going to be present here in this beautiful space on this most exciting day of the year. And we're going to appreciate the moment. And that's more than anything what I'm trying to communicate, establish, and build for them. In addition to like traditions and rituals like this, I think the real point is it starts to build a framework of what your family's about. And that's, I think, one of the things my kids have started to pick up on is just like, hey, like this is just what we do as a family. This is just who we are. And so going to church on Sundays, it is a part of that piece. It's really hard for us to get here. I have all the compassion for other families. My kids, we want them to be involved in activities too. And there are so many Sunday morning activities and I'm always working. So my wife has to figure out how to get kids where they need to go and how to get people to church at the same time. It's really difficult. But we are saying like, no, like this is part of who we are. This is part of our family mythology, is that we go on a Sunday morning to immerse ourselves in songs and prayers and liturgy and a story that's different, and to just kind of hear a different message than we might get the rest of the week. And I think that type of identity building is always really valuable for kids who are trying to figure out what it means to be human and who they are in this world as they grow and their bodies change. Yeah, like to give them a space that grounds them. And just in activities, like this is what we do. The other day, I really loved it. My son, we're driving home from church and he's like, I like that. I'm like, really? I'm like, you usually put up a fight to go to church, Sam. And he's like, no, but like, it just feels good to like go through and do that thing that we always do at church and then to get to go home and watch football. Like, yeah, you know what, man? That's awesome. And it's funny, like he said that, and I knew exactly what he was getting at because I remember it growing up too. I loved Sundays. I didn't want to go to church usually, but I just loved how it became a part of who I was and the rhythm that my body and my mind and my soul expected. Is like, yeah, like we're going to go, I'm going to wear nicer clothes and shoes that are a little uncomfortable. And I'm going to sit in the pew and we're going to go through it and I'll smell the smells of the church. And then afterwards, I'm going to like go watch football. And it's like, I did something good for myself this morning. I accomplished something and now I get to relax. I knew exactly what he was saying, but more to the point, this is what rituals and traditions do for us. They give you that grounding, that familiar repetition. There's something so valuable about that just for the human spirit, especially as we're growing up. That consistency that we can rely on, those familiar practices that become a part of who we are and how we go through the world. Another piece to raising kids in the faith is just to always remember there's this phrase that gets thrown around in youth ministry circles. Faith is caught, not taught, which really makes me feel good as someone who tries to teach the faith. But it's true. Like, what's most powerful for kids is seeing their parents taking an interest, finding security, finding help in the practices of faith. When they see that their parents get value out of religious practice, then kids internally start to think like, oh, like, yeah, maybe that'll be helpful for me too. I know that's the case for me. My dad, growing up, every morning, he would sit in this little chair in the corner of our living room. And so I'd come downstairs into the living room. There's Dad every morning without fail, sitting in his little chair, reading from one of his prayer books. And that like really taught me something about discipline and the daily importance of prayer. And my dad never talked to me about it. He never said like, oh, Nathaniel, you should do this too. I don't know why he had an accent like that. Uh, but I saw it and saw that this was important to him. And so I think that's part of where some of my practices developed out of. Similarly, one of the things I try to do, knowing that faith is caught, not taught, is also to just like point it out to my kids once in a while, which might be starting to skew towards the teaching side of things. So make of this what you will, but I can just say like, oh, hey, like I'm going to go pray for a little bit. Or yeah, like I remember when I came back, I've talked about this on the podcast before, came back from being with my mother when she passed away. And I just told my kids really plain, like, I just want you guys to know it was so hard. I'm so sad. And my like prayers and my belief in God really helps me at a time like this. And so I really hope that you kids can develop a sense of this as well. I just was that clear with them in that one isolated moment. And maybe that wasn't a good idea, but I think they really, just the way that conversation went, I think they really internalized that and saw and picked up on what I was saying about why this stuff matters. Some other just little pieces that I'll offer that have been important. My wife and I wrote individual blessings for each of our kids that we say to them at night. Not as much anymore as they get older, but every now and then we remember to do it. And that becomes something personal. Again, something grounded in identity, which is so valuable for a kid as they try to figure out who they are and what it means to be a human being in this world. And similar to that too, just taking time for these little practices, right? Faith is caught, not taught. And so lighting the Advent wreath at Christmas time in those weeks, or I should say at Advent time, in those weeks leading up to Advent, just is this ritual that the kids look forward to, that they're excited about because they know it means that we're in that whole season of light leading up to Christmas morning. And we also have one of my favorite things that we ever did is we created a prayer before mealtime that we originally just found the signs for in sign language because we wanted to be able for our young children to participate in the prayer and to start to develop their own sense of spirituality even before they were verbal. I don't know if anybody else did this, but you can teach your kids sign language at a very young age, and it's, helpful for them to communicate before they can use words. And so I can still do our sign language prayer, and we still do it as a family, even though all of them are very verbal and have been for many, many years. We say, thank you, Lord, for the food and today. Amen. That simple, that easy. And yet our kids have been doing it since they were 1 year old, which is kind of neat. And it's sort of an identifying thing. And so it's like, hey, should we say our prayer? Do you want to teach our prayer when someone comes over? And they're always less so now that they get older and they're too cool for this stuff, but they used to be really excited to be able to share this little piece of our family mythology with others. So I think those are the pieces that I wanted to say. As I close, I think the most important part that we've done is trying to give our kids a sense that God is not this angry deity watching their every move and constantly judging them. Fear is very rarely a good way to motivate anybody. And it just results in anxiety and worry and guilt and shame if fear is the predominant force. And so the way that we have taught our kids to think about God and that we do talk with them about is we'll ask them every now and then, when did your heart feel full today? When did your heart feel full? And helping them connect that deep emotional upwelling with the presence of God. That's what we tell them. When your heart felt full, that's when you know that God was there somehow, some way in that really special moment. That's an experience of the divine. And we're really true to this and hoping that through this consistent articulation of God as this experience of deep love and security, that will then mold them into the types of adults, hopefully, who can see the world in such a lens, not a fearful place, not worrying that they're not going to get their morals exactly right and God's going to judge them, but that God is forgiving and gracious, and that God is calling them to help make other people's hearts feel full in the way that they're treated, in the way that they're cared for. This ethic of love really, I think, needs to be at the heart of what we teach our kids about the faith more than anything else. And so it's just, I hope you can see, at least in the way that my wife and I are trying to do it, that underlies the whole endeavor. Yeah, wonder and curiosity and this respect for an idea, for a God that's bigger than your biggest idea, the humility that comes with that. And then more than anything, this sense of, when did your heart feel full? Yeah, those are the moments when God was connecting with your life. That's a God moment, when your heart felt full. And now, what does it mean to be a follower of this God, to be continuing to bring that type of love and security and humility and compassion to the world? So there you go. There's a whole lot of thoughts on raising kids in the faith. I would love to hear from you. What's working in your family? What questions do you have? What did I miss? I mean, we're all trying to figure this out together. And this is just my best attempt at it with my wonderful wife. I'm going to bring her on the podcast sometime too, and we can talk about it together. She's got her own ideas. That'll be fun. Stay tuned for that. But share this with family and friends. Share this with people who are wondering about how to raise their child in faith. Share this with friends who are pregnant and going to expect a child soon. Like, I really hope that this can be beneficial to people, because parenting is hard. and you know what? You're doing a great job. Sincerely, you're doing a great job. Anyways, I hope this was interesting, helpful, engaging. As always, everybody, stay in peace. Thank you for listening to the Together for Good podcast. If you'd like more resources for your walk of faith, please visit our website, bethany-denver.org, or download our mobile app by searching Bethany Connect in your phone's app store.